to do just that. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Brad Smith, for that very energizing address, ladies and gentlemen. I think he really deserves an energetic applause from you all. His address has actually given a very constructive direction to the discourse on artificial intelligence. And well, now we are moving to the next conversation, for which our guest is the person who's often called the godfather of deep learning. Our guest is Mr. Jan LeCun, Executive Chairman, Advanced Machine Intelligence Labs, and his foundational work on convolutional neural networks underpins virtually every image recognition system in use today. Now, at the frontier of next generation AI architectures, he's one of the field's most provocative and independent voices. Please welcome our next speaker, Mr. Jan LeCun. And this conversation will be moderated by Ms. Maria Shakil, Managing Editor, India Today. Please welcome our guest and our moderator. Mr. Jan LeCun, welcome.
Good afternoon, everyone. So let's begin with the big idea here, Professor LeCun. Are we on a path to creating the smartest mind that humanity has ever known? And will that happen in our lifetime?
Maybe in the lifetime of some people here, possibly not in mine. We'll see. It will take a while. But I think the more interesting thing that we're going to build is an amplifier for human intelligence. So maybe not an entity that uh, surpasses human intelligence in all domain, although that will happen at some point, but at least something that will amplify human intelligence in ways that will accelerate progress.
So then, will we end up defining and redefining genius? What will a genius be?
Well, I think several thousand years ago, or even a few centuries ago, what people identified as genius is very different from what we currently identify as genius. And I think there will be more evolution of that concept of genius. Um, in the past, perhaps, genius was, some act of creation or invention, but maybe not at the theoretical level like we tend to think of it today. It was, more practical. Certainly, in the very ancient past, people who figured out how to cultivate crops or domesticate animals probably were seen as genius.
So, we have often seen, and this is a thought that you have all, pretty openly shared, that AI is powerful but not intelligent. When we make that distinction, and there are conversations around LLM, where do you see intelligence and AI driven power?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of confusion, really, because we tend to anthropomorphize systems that can reproduce certain human functions. LLMs are incredibly useful. There's no question about that. And they do amplify human intelligence, like computer technology going back to the 1940s. Um, but LLMs, to some extent, except for a few domains, are mostly information retrieval systems. They can compress a lot of factual knowledge that has been previously produced by humans and can give easy access to it. In a way, it's kind of a natural evolution of, the printing press, the libraries, the internet, and search engines, right? It's just a more efficient way to access information. Uh, and there are a few domains where the intelligent capabilities of those systems actually is more than that. It's more than just retrieval. So for generating code, maybe doing some type of mathematics, that we're getting the impression that it's beyond this. But it's still to a large extent domains where reasoning has to do with manipulating symbols. The problem is that why do we have systems that can pass the bar exam and win mathematics Olympiads, but we don't have domestic robots? We don't even have self-driving cars. And we certainly do not have self-driving cars that can teach themselves to drive in 20 hours of practice like any 17-year-old. So we're missing something big still.
So what are we teaching a 17-year-old then?
Well, so the question is, how does a baby learn? Or even an animal, right? Animals have a much better understanding of the physical world than any AI systems that we have today, which is why we don't have smart robots, and so we learn about the world, how the world works, mostly by observation when we are babies, a few months old, and then we learn by interaction, and we learn mental models of the world that allows us to apprehend any new situation, even if we haven't been exposed to it beforehand. We can still handle it. So a big buzzword in AI today is world models, and this is really this idea that we develop mental models of the world that allow us to think ahead, to apprehend new situations, plan sequence of actions, reason, and predict the consequences of our actions, which is absolutely critical. And LLMs don't do this, really.
There is the sense, Professor, that perhaps AI will unlock an era of radical abundance. Will this abundance benefit us?
Well, so there, if you talk to economists, they tell you, if we can measure the improvement that AI will bring to productivity, which is, amount of wealth produced per hour worked, is going to add up to maybe 0.6% per year. Okay, this is from economists that actually have studied the effect of technological revolutions on the labor market and the economy. People like Philippe Aghion or Eric Brynjolfsson. And so that seems small. It's actually quite big. And, it's certainly going to accelerate scientific progress in medicine. I do not believe there's going to be like a singular identifiable point where the economy is going to take off and there's going to be abundance. And there's also the question of the policies surrounding this. Are those benefits going to be shared across humanity or different categories of people in various countries? And that's a political question. It has nothing to do with technology.
So, if economists see this as boom, will then openness survive?
It's not going to be an event. It's going to be progressive. Yeah, there is this false idea that somehow at some point we're going to discover the secret of human level intelligence. I don't like the phrase AGI because human intelligence is specialized, so I don't like the artificial general intelligence phrase. But it's not going to be an event. We're not going to discover one secret. We're going to make continuous progress, and we're not going to be able to measure that progress by just having a series of tests that are going to test, whether a machine is more intelligent than humans, because machines are already more intelligent than humans on a growing number of narrow tasks. And so, it's not like a uniform, scalar measurement of quality. It's a collection of quality. But what's more important is that intelligence is not just a collection of skills, it's an ability to learn new skills extremely quickly and even to accomplish new tasks without being trained to do it the first time we apprehend it. That's really what intelligence should be measured at. So we're not going to be able to just design a test that is going to figure out, our machine is more intelligent than humans.
So, if it's about upskilling and ensuring that you're relevant, then only perhaps you're intelligent. Uh, will that then mean that the countries that adopt AI and the pace at which India and the scale at which India has adopted AI, the challenge would be to create talent which is upskilled and reskilled and have the required skills for this?
Absolutely. So the relationship that we're going to have with intelligent AI systems is going to be similar to the relationship that a leader in business, politics, or academia, or some other domain has with their staff. Okay, AI is going to be our staff. Every one of us is going to be a manager of a staff of intelligent machines. They'll do our bidding. They might be smarter than us, but certainly if you are an academic or a politician, you work with staff that are smarter than you. In fact, that's the whole point. You need to attract people who are smarter than you, because that's what makes you more productive. For an academic, it's students who are smarter than their professor and teach. It's not the professor that teaches graduate students; it's the other way around, actually. And certainly, we have a lot of examples of politicians who are surrounded by people who are smarter than them.
Earlier today, when Prime Minister Modi addressed the gathering, he said that India doesn't fear AI. We are seeing this as our destiny future, which is Bhagya. Do you see that with a summit of this nature being hosted in India, it's a message to the global south, and that's where perhaps the next big innovation in AI could be coming from?
Well, long term is going to come from countries that have favorable demographics, and that means India, Africa. The youth is the most creative part of humanity, and there's sort of a deficit of that in the north, uh, largely. So the scientists of the top scientists of the future, and in fact, many of the present are from India, and in the future will be from mostly Africa. So, what does that mean, though? Right? It means having incentives for young people to kind of study, first of all. So the idea that somehow we don't need to study anymore because AI is going to do it for us, and that's completely false, absolutely completely false. And it's not because I'm a professor, okay, that I'm saying this. On the contrary, we're going to have to study more. We see, for example, a trend where in industry, in the past, in certain countries, it's certainly true for India, but it's also true in European countries, and certainly in the US, we see more demand for people with more education at the PhD level, for example. The demand for PhD level scientists in industry has grown in the last 15 years, in part because of AI, but because of everything, because technological progress and hinges on scientific progress, and scientific progress is brought about by scientists, and scientists mostly have done PhDs, and so there is more demand for education, not less. Uh, and so for countries in the global south, that means investing in education and youth.
And making AI more accessible, something that India believes in. Democratizing AI, AI for all, is the theme of this summit as well. Do you think AI can become that accessible, particularly uh, for a country as large as ours with 1.4 billion people?
Yeah, in all kinds of ways. Unfortunately, the cost of inference for AI system has to come down to kind of become practical for the vast majority of population in a country like India. Right now, the inference is just too expensive, and energy costs and things like that. It's mostly energy costs, actually. Uh, so this has to come down, but then it will play a role in education. AI will improve the quality of education, not degrade it. Once we figure out how to use it best, it will improve, uh, you know, agriculture and
In
everything else.
healthcare, in particular.
Healthcare, of course, right? So I don't work at Meta anymore, but there was an experiment a couple of years ago or a year ago that was run by my former colleagues, where they gave smart glasses to
Yes.
agriculture, to farmers in India, and they could talk to the AI assistant to figure out, like, what is this disease on my plant, or should I harvest now, or what's going to be the weather, and
Yes,
I
it
think
is
those
being
things.
used a lot in agriculture as well.
That's right.
It is assisting farmers to ensure that their produce gets better, they make right choices. But when you say about education, will AI assist education in terms of making students or youth of the country more literate, or will they become more AI dependent?
Well, I mean, we're dependent on technology, right? I'm dependent on this pair of glasses, otherwise I don't see you. So that's been that's been with us for centuries. Yeah, we'll be dependent on AI, of course, but AI will facilitate access to knowledge, and thereby kind of be a tool for education. I think the effect on society, might be extrapolated from what was observed in the 15th century when the printing press started enabling the production of printed matters and the dissemination of knowledge, right? It had a huge effect on society worldwide, at least in countries that allowed it to flourish. And I think it's going to be a similar transformation with AI, of course, in the modern world. Just more access to knowledge. The internet played also a similar role, and I think this is just going to make people more informed, smarter, able to make more rational decision if it's deployed in the proper way.
So, if you were to define this moment which we are witnessing in history, we are living it. How will you say it? Is it like the advent of electricity?
Yeah, people have made that claim,
They have made that claim,
including
yes.
economists. It's the new electricity. I think it's more like the new printing press, really. But uh, again, in the sort of this vision of kind of more dissemination and sharing of knowledge and amplification of human intelligence. But you know, the impact on society and the way countries need to be run is very difficult to predict at this point. I'm sort of an optimist in the sense that I think societies will figure out how best to use that technology for the benefits of their population.
While I am an optimist, nevertheless, I'm going to ask this question to you, Professor. Are we overestimating the change or underestimating what has struck us?
So usually in technological shifts of this type, we are overestimating the changes in the short term and underestimating them in the long term. Uh, I think for AI, it's a little bit different because there's been a huge amount of hype and expectations that, you know, the transition to human level AI, superhuman level AI, is going to be an event and is going to happen within the next few years. And people have been making that claim for the last 15 years, and it's been false. In fact, they've been making it for the last 60 years or 70 years, and it's been false. Every time in the history of AI that scientists have discovered kind of a new paradigm on AI, how you build intelligent machines, people have claimed, within 10 years, the smartest entity on the planet will be a computer. And that just proved to be wrong, 4 or 5 times in the last 70 years. It's still wrong. We're still very far from that. We're not very far. We're getting close, right? We're seeing the end of the tunnel, but it's not like, we're going to have super intelligent systems within 2 years. It's just not happening because of this gap. Right? Where is the robot that can learn to drive in 20 hours of practice, like a 17-year-old? Even though we have millions of hours of training data of people driving cars around, we should be able to train an AI system to just imitate that. That doesn't actually quite work. It's not reliable enough.
Okay, so let's try and wrap up this conversation with who gets to define intelligence now onwards. Will it be actually humans, machines, or both together?
Probably both together, but mostly humans. Like we set the agenda, uh, and the biggest difficulty is not to get fooled into thinking that a computer system is intelligent simply because it can manipulate language. We tend to think of language as the epitome of human intelligence, right? But in fact, it turns out language is easy to deal with because language is really a sequence of discrete symbols of which there is only a finite number, and that turns out to make things easy when you train a system to predict what the next word is in a text, which is what LLMs are based on. It turns out the real world is much, much more complicated. And it's been known in computer science for many years. It's called the Moravec paradox, after a roboticist, Hans Moravec. And so the company I'm building and the research program I've been working on for the last 15 years or so is intelligence for the real world. How to deal with high-dimensional, continuous, noisy signal that the real world is, which your house cat is perfectly able to deal with, or a squirrel or whatever, but not computers yet. That's the big challenge for the next few years in AI, dealing with the real world. And that's the point of the company I'm building.
So AI has to deal with the real world, or real world has to deal with AI.
AI has to deal with the real world, the messiness of the real world, the unpredictability of the real world.
All right. Thank you so much for this conversation,
Thank you.
Professor.
Thank you, Mr. LeCun, for sharing your insights on artificial intelligence. And thanks, Maria, for moderating this conversation. Ladies and gentlemen,